So if you can picture me as a 3 or 4-year-old little girl, I grew up in a small village, and domestic violence was very prevalent in my life. It was all I knew. And one of my very earliest memories as a little girl was hearing my parents argue. I was in the other room, and I could hear them yelling, and so I came out. I came out into this little doorway and watched my parents arguing over somebody who was sitting out in the living room. And I remember my sister was there with me, and I'm only about this big. And my father is yelling, and all of a sudden he literally picks my mother up and throws her across the room. And I was frozen. I was frozen in fear because I didn't know what to do about it, and I wanted to save her. I didn't want to see her be hurt. I wanted to reach out to her. I wanted to stop my father. And I knew that if I did, if I stepped in, that I would be the one being thrown across the room. My sister has no memory of this incident at all, and she was standing right next to me. Later on in my life, still as a little girl, under 5 years old, I remember my father came into the room one night, and he was yelling at us, and he looked at us, and we were laying down in bed, and we were sound asleep, and he woke us up out of this dead sleep, and he said, "Wake up, wake up, do you love me? Do you love me?" And we woke up out of this shock, out of this dead sleep, and we looked up at our daddy, and we said, "Dad, I love you, Daddy." What I didn't know, and what I learned later on in my life, was that my dad was standing there with a knife behind his back. And if I didn't say, "I love you," he was going to cut me. One day he came home, and he was yelling at us, and he was yelling about our cat. He said, my cat was my friend. So if I had no one else to talk to, just like any other small child, your pet is the one that you talk to. They're my best friend. So I didn't know where the cat was. But he came yelling at us into the house and said, "I ran over your cat. That's what you get for letting your cat out." So my mom lived like that for many years of her life with this man. And I remember one night, in the middle of the night, being whisked away. And my mom grabbed us in our jammies and said, "We got to go." And I remember just leaving. And I had no idea what was happening. I didn't know that there was anything wrong with that life. And all of a sudden, I'm without a dad. As I got older, and my mom remarried, I had relationships as a young teenage girl. I get involved with somebody who was also violent, and I thought this was normal. I thought that it was okay to be yelled at. I thought that if I didn't do something right, or if I didn't say the right thing, that I deserved to be hit. That it was my fault. I had lots of fights with my parents. I disrespected them. I learned how to be angry myself from watching my mom lash out and be angry also. And at the young age of 17, I found myself pregnant. And I had dreams. I had dreams just like any other kid. I wanted to have a home. I wanted to have an education. I didn't want my children to see what I saw. I didn't want my children to grow up thinking that it was okay for someone to tell you what a horrible person you are and use that kind of language. But I found myself a single mom, and I had to support this child one way or another. So I got married at 22. I was very young, and we had another child. And I didn't realize that I had learned to do everything that I promised myself I would never do. My children learned what it was like to see an angry mother. I never hit my kids, never once. I didn't even believe in spanking my kids, which some of my other siblings didn't understand after my mom had remarried. But what I did do is yell at them. I lectured them. I called them names. I asked how they could be so stupid. And when I was angry, they were the ones that I took it out on. I broke lamps. I threw bowls across the room. I cleared off countertops with my arm. I was an angry woman. And unfortunately, it played out in my marriage. As much as I knew what it was like to watch my mom go through what she went through, my husband knew what it was like for me to be that way to him. I called him names. I threw things at him. I pushed him. My mom told me about this conference. It was called Beauty for Ashes. My marriage was falling apart. We'd only been together 3 years. We had 3 children. We had lost 2 children. And I knew this conference was going to fix my husband because something was wrong with him, or our marriage would be better. So I went to this conference. And I told my mom I don't need it. I don't have a story to tell. Nothing ever happened in my life that people need to know about or that would change anything anyway, so why bother? But my husband can use it, so I'll go. What was hard about that is I found out for the first time that it wasn't normal, that my childhood wasn't normal, that everything that had happened to me, that had harmed me, I had now harmed my children. I harmed my husband. I even harmed some of my siblings. It was the hardest thing that I could ever go through in my life. I had taken their voices. So I spent another 5 years of my life after that giving my children their voices back. I shared a little bit of my story with them as they got old enough to hear my story. I allowed them to use their voice with me, which was even harder for any of you who have teenage children. It's harder. Well, one day, after many of our family had been through this same conference, we were doing a big family party, and we were down in Homer, and we're at a beach, and there's some drinking there. And when people drink, sometimes they do inappropriate things and use language they shouldn't. And one of my children stood up and said, "Hey, this is not okay. You guys drinking out here like this in front of all of these little kids is not okay. And the way you're talking around them is not okay." And that was when normally most people are going to go, "Hey, don't talk to your elders that way. That's not okay." And instead of that, we stood there with our mouths hanging open thinking, I just gave my children their voice back.
Marie, can I respond to you? I want to thank you for sharing your story with us today. The images that I've heard this is only the 3rd time now that I've heard this story. And the part that keeps getting me is I wish I could have been there to protect that 3-4-year-old girl, to stand up and say, stop, no, wait, make you feel safe. Because it's not fair. It wasn't fair that you had to witness that, and that you felt paralyzed, that you weren't able to do anything. I feel scared. I feel that sense of fear for, when your dad comes in and rushing in the room and you say, I love you. That wasn't fair. I have known you for the better part of almost 20 years now, and I've watched you with your kids, and I would have never imagined. The only thing I've ever seen is a loving, doting mother on her children who sacrifices day in and day out to make sure that they feel safe, that they feel that their voice is there. I've seen you give them their voice, and I've witnessed you being able to allow them to use their voice and how you've responded with them. And I so admire you for the mother that you are, the wife that you are, the friend, colleague that you are. It's just really great to see you use your voice and allow others to use theirs as well. So I thank you. Can I give you a hug? So, question for all of you. I want you to start to think about, how have you been silenced in your life? And then also start to think about how you've silenced others in your life, whether it be your family, your colleagues. It's just something to think about, is that silence. And then, are you willing to break that silence?